Hello and welcome back to Mindful Legacy. This is how colonialism came to be and how they used Christianity to manipulate the people and control them through fear. So, without further ado, hope you guys enjoy. Take care. Peace.
Mindful Legacy and Digital Index Media presents The Misuse of God, a 5-part series. Episode 3, Faith and Fear, the Psychological Chains of Control. At some point in human history, faith became less about freedom and more about fear. It stopped being a bridge to the divine and became a barrier, one guarded by rules, rituals, and the threat of eternal punishment. In this 3rd episode of The Misuse of God, we reflect on how faith was psychologically shaped into a system of obedience, submission, and guilt, how belief was used to bend the spirit rather than free it, and we explore how we can heal from that conditioning together by returning to the awareness that love, not fear, was always meant to be our teacher. Part 1. The Psychology of Obedience. The most powerful control doesn't come from chains or cages. It comes from belief. If we can be taught to police our own thoughts in fear of divine wrath, we become the perfect subjects for earthly power. Throughout centuries, fear of God was intentionally amplified, not to deepen reverence, but to sustain authority. Churches taught that questioning leadership was the same as questioning God. Disobedience was framed as sin. Curiosity was labeled rebellion. We were trained to distrust our own spiritual instincts, to seek permission for our connection to the divine. But this conditioning wasn't only religious, it was psychological. It formed guilt loops that made us self-punish for being human, for desiring, for doubting, for exploring. And once fear takes root in the mind, love becomes hard to trust. Reflection. How many of our beliefs about God are truly ours, and how many were inherited through fear? What does healthy spiritual obedience look like when rooted in love rather than fear? How can we tell when our conscience has been conditioned instead of awakened? Part 2. The Architecture of Fear. The weaponization of faith did not stop with sermons. It was built into our architecture, our art, and our rituals. Church cathedrals rose high, not only to inspire awe, but to remind us of our smallness. Images of eternal fire and suffering filled our imaginations from childhood. Stories of punishment outnumbered stories of love. These tools shaped a worldview: God is watching. But not as a compassionate witness, as a cosmic warden. Fear became the foundation of moral order. And in that fear, we began to mistake submission for spirituality. Yet even as fear grew, the truth still flickered in the background, in mystics, saints, and sages, who spoke of love's supremacy over law. But most were silenced, exiled, or erased. The architecture of fear was never built to bring us closer to God. It was built to keep us dependent on those claiming to represent God. Reflection. How has fear shaped the way we think about morality, heaven, and hell? What happens when sacred art and stories are used more for control than connection? Can fear and love coexist in the same heart, or must one give way for the other to lead? Part 3. Guilt, shame, and control. Once fear had done its work, guilt became the maintenance system. A person controlled by guilt needs no warden, only a reminder of their supposed unworthiness. Across centuries, guilt was institutionalized through confession, public penance, and self-denial. Faith became a cycle of sin, shame, and submission. We began to believe that suffering was holy and pleasure was sinful, that questioning was dangerous and silence was sacred. But guilt is not growth. It's stagnation disguised as humility. True repentance is not self-hate, it's self-awareness. When we learn to love ourselves as we are, we begin to dismantle the systems that feed on our shame. Because love doesn't require manipulation, it invites transformation. Reflection. How much of our guilt is spiritual, and how much was psychologically installed by generations of fear? Is it possible to heal from religious shame while still honoring our faith? What would it mean to practice repentance through awareness rather than punishment? Part 4. Reclaiming the Inner Temple. Every era of human history has produced those who refuse to be ruled by fear, who rediscover faith as direct relationship, not dictated hierarchy. They remind us that the truest temple is not made of stone, it's made of consciousness, and that when we awaken to divine awareness within, no external force can dictate what we believe or how we love. To reclaim our inner temple, we must release the psychological chains of guilt and fear. We must remember that faith is not about control, it's about connection. Not about punishment, but about presence. When fear is gone, control crumbles, and in that moment, we rediscover the heart of faith, freedom. Reflection. What does it mean to rebuild our spiritual foundation on love instead of fear? How can awareness itself become our form of worship? What would change in our lives if we lived from trust rather than guilt? Closing thought. The misuse of God was never about God. It was about fear disguised as faith. But faith can heal when we return to its true essence, love. In the next and final episode, we explore how we can move forward, how we can rebuild communities, relationships, and spiritual practices rooted not in control, but in conscious compassion. Because only through awareness can we truly be free. This has been an original script by J. Bell, copyright Mindful Legacy TM 2025. All rights reserved.